Basically, this generation is more liberal, more tolerant, more Democrat-leaning than the one before. It's not just because they're young.
For another point of view, it's Hard News with Russell Brown and Wammo on Kiwi.
From publicaddress.net, the Hard News blog there, also the Media 7 show on TVNZ7. Russell Brown's with us. Morning, Russell.
Good morning.
And the tornado yesterday in Auckland went from the North Shore and eventually made its way through Point Chev as well.
Yeah, it was quite extraordinary, actually, because I oddly enough, wasn't looking at Twitter at the time and didn't know what was coming. We didn't see our part of Point Chev, where the less posh part. We didn't actually see the twister itself, but suddenly there was some of the heaviest rain I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
To the point where I stood out on the porch and went, wow, I haven't seen rain like this before. And I knew I had to go for a doctor's appointment. I was thinking, well, I hope it stops raining by then.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there in the waiting room, got my phone out while I'm waiting, and what? There's
I
a
know.
tornado in my neighbourhood?
And then suddenly you're getting all these pictures and videos coming through as well, almost, instantly, really.
Yeah, it was, in some ways, I guess it was sort of the perfect place to get a lot of citizen video, because, there are a lot of people working in, tech firms and that sort of thing in Albany.
Yeah.
Places like MaxNet are there, and there were at least half a dozen clips got up to YouTube really quickly, actually.
And I haven't heard much about Point Chev. Was there any damage there?
Apparently some stuff got thrown around down the end of the point.
Okay.
There was stuff all over the street.
Yeah.
But I think it had lost a lot of its energy by then.
Run out of
across
puff.
the harbour.
Yeah.
I mean, there was still damage in Birkenhead.
Yeah.
It's kind of a little reminding of the power of nature.
Oh.
Like we need that in New Zealand.
Exactly. just incredible. Let's move on to one of the top stories of the week, of course. Osama bin Laden, shot and dead. The world's still not a safer place, though.
No, and I think you'd be foolish to assume that this is the end of jihadism, because it quite clearly isn't. But I've taken a similar view to Julissa Gracewood on Public Address. We both posted quite similar thoughts yesterday, that there is a symbolic moment here. And on that basis, I'm inclined to cut some slack to the people who celebrated the death of another human in the streets, because most of those people were young, and when you look at it, they've been living in a country under heavy manners for more than half their lives. This is 10 years. And these kids have never gotten on a plane without it being a weird and stressful and slightly terrifying experience. Flying in the States is awful.
Yeah.
And just the whole the authoritarian, the kind of contempt that flowed from that initial trauma. If America can move on from that now, and I think that's a really good thing.
Do you think they are, though? I mean, are the rights and freedoms that have been lost during the so-called war on terror going to be restored just because this guy's dead?
Not straight away, no. That would be unrealistic, I think. But I do think there is a chance there to move on. I mean, really, there's not all that much that's amenable to symbolism, which is really what the killing of bin Laden is at this point.
Yeah.
But the mood of America maybe is. It's interesting that, as expected, Obama's poll ratings have shifted already.
Yeah.
They've actually already begun to close up. He'd slid out to about minus 5 points on job approval. And the day of the raids, a couple of polls came out, suddenly showing them closing up, and that, you have to presume, was because of his performance in slam-dunking Donald Trump at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Yeah, while knowing that this operation was underway.
Yeah, man, ice water in the veins or what?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, and I think in some ways it validates what people had seen as a too passive persona for him, too undemonstrative. It always amazes me that Americans on the left and the right seem to want this guy in a cowboy hat or an action hero for their president, and in most cases that's not a very good idea.
But now he really is the commander-in-chief.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, the fact that he was able to get up at that dinner and crack jokes and look for all the world relaxed when he knew what was in motion.
Yeah.
It really is quite extraordinary.
Yeah. For me, though, the whole episode does show this major sort of cultural divide and difference between the people of America and New Zealand.
Yes.
And the different values that we have. And for me, for one, it's made me less tolerant of having New Zealand troops in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Well, I think basically nearly all the troops should be coming back from Afghanistan now. I think there's the opportunity exists to accelerate that drawdown.
Then I was talking to Russell Norman about this earlier, the fact that it's not an election issue. It should be an election issue, should it not?
Look, I'm actually quite appalled by the approach that John Key and Wayne Mapp have taken towards the Metro story and its author, John Stevenson. They are basically looking to smear him. They have not provided any evidence to back up their side of the story, that we didn't take detainees and we didn't hand them to anyone. And now Wayne Mapp in Parliament yesterday admitted that we did actually take some prisoners in February of this year. So the story kind of comes out in dribs and drabs, and everything that comes out tends to validate John Stevenson's reporting. I really think that their decision to attack his credibility rather than address the issue is lamentable. It's quite nasty.
I think it could come back to bite them.
Yeah.
I mean, if John Stevenson is a brilliant journalist.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't want to be on the other side of John Stevenson and on the other side of an investigation.
No.
So, he's certainly very, very talented.
He is, yes.
Let's move on to the Law Commission report into recreational drugs in New Zealand. They've come out with a whole bunch of recommendations.
Yeah, and most of them are pretty sensible. It's not exactly the revolution, but there are things there, starting with new substances. The Misuse of Drugs Act never really had any decent way of addressing new recreational drugs because no one thought that there would be that many new ones. And things have either been banned off the cuff because they are deemed to be analogues of already banned drugs, regardless of how good or bad they are. And yet you've had stuff being sold in dairies. There needs to be something more sensible done there. And what they're proposing is what people like Matt Bowden have been saying for a while, that there needs to be a process for approving these things.
Yeah.
And in doing so, you have to take the mighty great step of getting over the fact that a substance might be psychoactive. That's why people take them, basically.
But then, what about on the illegal drug side of things? They're recommending a three-step warning system for Class C drug offences, including social dealing. Yeah,
I think they're basically just trying to keep people out of court because there's no indication. There's any amount of New Zealand research, including the Auckland University School of Medicine studies, that says basically the legal status of cannabis in particular has virtually no impact on on whether people use it. They start and stop of their own accord, and meanwhile you've just got all these people getting convictions that will hurt them all their lives, clogging up the courts, and they're saying. But it's interesting that they've addressed the social dealing thing as well, because someone who gets some pot or gets a couple of pills for their mate before they go out was in danger of being deemed a drug dealer and possession for supply and all that entails. And the Law Commissioner said, hey, actually this doesn't make a lot of sense either. And I see the police have come out against it. I'm slightly surprised, actually, because surely the police have more things to do than to pursue these very, very minor cases.
I'm surprised that the police, I guess this is on the submission process, but that they even have a view. Don't they just take the direction from government, that they shouldn't even have a view on this?
I don't mind the police having a submission because they do have to apply the law. But, yeah, the idea that it will be too difficult to spot the difference between so-called social supply and commercial drug dealing, I don't think that stacks up.
So they're worried about the practicalities on the ground?
Yeah. It just doesn't really seem to make sense to me, to be honest.
Now, is the Law Commission all but saying decriminalisation of marijuana?
No, they're not saying that, actually. What they are saying is that they're saying that they believe the criminal penalties should continue to apply, and probably it would have been politically incorrect for them to say anything else.
Right.
But they are making the point that it does us no good to have all these people going through the courts. It doesn't stop people using drugs. In fact, it may make things worse. It's actually quite an interesting report, and I know that there are a few people sitting waiting to see what Peter Dunn would say, because he has received the report as Associate Health Minister, and he's actually been relatively positive about it. In some ways, it's not surprising, because he has in the past backed ideas like specialist drug courts and treatment rather than conviction. I must say it's quite nice in the Law Commission report to see that they've made the point that sometimes even treatment is not really appropriate. It's just a waste of resources treating people who don't need treatment. If someone has an E at the weekend and is unfortunate enough to get busted with it, what exactly are you treating there?
Does the media have a responsibility here in the reporting of these recommendations? Yeah,
and the Stuff sub-editor who headlined the brief for the story about the Law Commission report on Stuff yesterday on the homepage, soft on drugs. Wow, that's just completely unhelpful. It just sets a ridiculous frame for it. No, let's say it's sensible on drugs.
And I noticed you tweeted that, and it was not long after that they changed the headline.
They did change it, yes. So maybe that was me, because it was ridiculous. I mean, they're not saying, they're not talking about making anything legal. They're talking about what's sensible. What is actually productive and what's counterproductive.
And of course, the Stuff is only interested in what is going to be sensational.
Exactly.
Thanks very much, Russell.
Righto.
Cheers. Russell Brown at publicaddress.net and the Media 7 Show on TVNZ.